Welcome. Happy National Apprenticeship Week. Thank you everyone for joining us today for the future of apprenticeships. This is the Apprentice Takeover. This is produced and got all of the social media that's got in place to be able to welcome everyone to the show by apprentices, but also presented by apprentices. My role today is going to be a little bit different to normal, where I'm going to be actually hosting, but we're going to have start off with John-Joe, who's going to be presenting with me, and then we're going to have two other apprentices that are going to be joining too, and a lot of different range of apprentices. Sometimes all we see are certain levels of apprentices, like degree level apprenticeships at National Apprenticeship Week, but we've got all levels today. My name is Gavin O'Mara. I'm the CEO and founder of FE News. Thank you for joining us. This is a totally co-produced live stream with FE News and our friends at NCFE. And credit where credit's due, at the end of the Future Apprenticeships live stream season last year, Susan Slater said to me at the end, "Cool, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a live stream that was set up by apprentices and run by apprentices?" And here we are today. So Suzanne, thanks so much for a really cool idea. Thank you everyone for joining us. We've got a load of really interesting stuff to go through. I think now it's time to introduce John-Joe to join us in the studio. John-Joe, how are you?
Are you all right? I'm okay. Thanks very much. How are you?
Yeah, really good. How's your National Apprenticeship Week going?
It's been really good. I'm very busy, but I've been involved in a lot of cool things. So it's been very good.
So what did you get up to yesterday? I know you was in London and stuff like that. And
yeah, I went down on the train to London for the it was an executive sort of apprenticeship event. So it was a networking event at the Guildhall. So I had to go down there. It was obviously my first time traveling somewhere far away for work. So it was a really good experience. And I was accompanied by one of our exec teams. So it was quite useful. And I got to meet some apprentices and some people who sort of have a high interest in apprenticeships throughout the day. So it was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, cool. Last year you had an interesting National Apprenticeship Week where you was like basically running NCFE for a week, wasn't it? So what was that about?
Yeah, I did a shadowing event with the CEO of NCFE, David Gallagher. So we did a little bit of like reversal where he shadowed me for a little bit doing some apprentice duties. And I shadowed him for a while as well. And sort of got to sit in on some exec meetings or get a view for what he does during his day-to-day role. And we did a couple of interviews and stuff as well. And we recorded for sort of NCFE's marketing. So overall, that was a brilliant experience as well.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. So we've got a lot of really cool guests today. So we've got two other apprentices. We've got Sofia and Umayr, who we're going to be talking to in a little bit. We've got David Hughes, CEO of the Association of Colleges. We've got Sue Pittock, who's CEO of Remit Training. But we did a pre-record with Toby Perkins. This is John-Joe's first ever interview with the Shadow Skills Minister. So should we bring it in and see what Toby's got to say? So Toby, happy National Apprenticeship Week and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a really important week. It's a great week. It's one I really enjoy, and a whole variety of different opportunities to get around and see apprentices this week, which is great.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's a really, really busy week for you. And as it's the Apprentice Takeover, it's weird for me. I'm going to have to stop talking now. I'm going to hand you over to John-Joe with a bunch of really sort of thought through questions, actually, as personal experience of him and other apprentices that are going to be joining the show.
Nice. So hi Toby, thanks very much for coming on and joining me. I've just got a couple of questions, like Gavin said, just about sort of our experiences as apprentice, just to get your take on things.
Okay.
So the first question is, what's your vision for the future of apprenticeships, and are you fully behind them as a learning pathway?
Yeah, I'm 100% behind them. I think they're the gold standard in terms of skills policy in this country. I think that the future of apprenticeships for me has got to be about making sure they're available to employ businesses and smaller workplaces, as well as those apprenticeship levy funders. I think they've got to be available for more young people leaving school. I think they need to be available as a route for straight A students rather than being seen as something that the kids who aren't doing A levels do. And I think we need to improve the pathways beyond A levels so that some students might pursue an A level path, but rather than going on to university, consider apprenticeships. I think the level 4-5 offer is important in that regard. So, I mean, I'm 100% behind apprenticeships. It's precisely because I've seen the value of them that I think we need to do more to make them more widely available. And it is damaging that the number of apprenticeships, and particularly the number of SME apprenticeships, the number of level 2 and 3 apprenticeships, have all fallen since the introduction of the levy, and that's something we'd be keen to remedy.
Yeah. So the other question we've got is so some of the biggest challenges for apprentices right now are due to the cost of living crisis. So, in your opinion, what more can be done to ensure that apprentices aren't forced to choose a higher paid job over a sort of a job with higher career prospects in the end?
I mean, I think it's an incredibly perceptive question, John-Joe, because you're absolutely right. Many students are left with this choice between their immediate financial needs and what might provide the greater opportunities for the future. And those employers, at the moment where there is a skills and labour shortage right across the country, those employers who don't have great prospects know they have to offer good money because it's the only way they're going to be able to attract staff. And I've heard so many times, that people are choosing to do things that we might attribute less value to, rather than things that are incredibly important. I think that what I would say to employers is they have to be competitive, but it is also a role for government to make sure that apprenticeships are seen as attractive and are not simply the preserve of those who can afford to be subsidised by their parents. I think particularly since the introduction of the degree apprenticeships, we've seen a big kind of middle class grab of degree apprenticeships. The number of learners in more deprived communities getting onto degree apprenticeships is very, very low. And so, that is something the government needs to be really conscious of. I think the whole area of support for learners, obviously this government got rid of the education maintenance allowance, which was important for some of those students choosing to go to college. Obviously, apprenticeship minimum wage is very low. And so I think all of these are live conversations to have for both the government and the employer. But I think you're absolutely right to identify that that's a genuine barrier for a lot of young people.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it really is, because a lot of people now were sort of spoke about the last time. They always talk about sort of jobs for survival versus jobs for progression. And there's more and more young people choosing those jobs for survival because of the sort of crisis that we've been in since COVID. So this kind of ties on to the next question, and it's how can we ensure that apprenticeships are consistently included as part of careers advice in schools?
I mean, I think the key point really is that careers guidance needs to be independent. Too often careers guidance in the last 12 years has been seen as a kind of an add-on. Over the first 5 years, there was basically careers service and the connections was abolished without any real replacement. I think the government realised that was a significant mistake, and they have attempted to rebuild it somewhat. But it's still very much the school's responsibility. And, some schools are excellent at it. In many other cases, the provision is patchy. It's often aimed only at those students who aren't suitable for doing A levels. Whereas careers guidance should be available not only for all students at the age of 16, but also for all students much earlier than that. We need students to be able to make sense of the options they have for GCSEs. And part of that is understanding, whether they do science, whether they do PE, whether they do history, what the relevance of those subjects are going to be to what their next pathways are going to be. So, I mean, I see careers as absolutely fundamental, and it must be There must be sort of minimum standards that are strictly adhered to. And I think it needs to be independent of any alternative interests other than providing the very best advice to learners.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks very much. And sort of my last question is, what does the future of apprenticeships levy look like to you?
Well, the Labour Party are already committed to introducing greater flexibility to the apprenticeship levy. We've proposed creating a skills and growth levy, which 50% would still be absolutely directly in line with apprenticeships as it is now. The other 50% could also be used for apprenticeships for those companies and employers for whom they're working well. But we think that, for example, in terms of traineeships and pre-apprenticeship work, trying to support some of those learners that maybe aren't quite ready for an apprenticeship yet, but could be enabled to utilise their skills. There's real potential in that regard. And also for retraining of people who have skills already, maybe don't need a formal apprenticeship, but do need to be transitioned. For example, heating and plumbing engineers who can be trained to install heat pumps. Or motor vehicle mechanics who can be trained to do electric vehicles. These are the kind of things that we foresee the skills and growth levy being able to be utilised for, alongside our commitment to apprenticeships that I've already outlined. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Thanks very much.
No problem at all. Well, thanks, John-Joe, for those questions and specifically for raising the voice of apprentices, because it is so important that this discussion's often had purely in the context of employers, and the empowered voice of apprentices is an important one too. So thank you for the questions.
No worries. Thanks very much for your time and thanks for answering my questions.
No worries. Cheers.
So we're back. Thanks so much, John-Joe, for that. I think you did great. First ever interview with a government minister is pretty cool. Just to highlight, we're live, so it is now 10:12. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, we've got a real rich depth of knowledge and experience in our guests here. So we do our very best to answer those questions. Try not to make them too long because it gets a bit weird when it sort of covers your face when you're on this side of the screen. But yeah, should we bring in our guests to begin with that are soon going to become presenters? So I wonder if we could bring in Umayr, and I wonder if we could bring in Sofia. Hey, Umayr. Hey, Sofia. How are you? So, I wonder if you could maybe introduce yourself and what your apprenticeship is and who you're with.
Absolutely. So my name is Umayr Tanveer. I'm a multi-award-winning software engineering apprentice at BT in my final year. I'm really kind of almost finished my apprenticeship. I have a few months left, and it's been an absolute ride over the last few years. And I've picked up so much and gained so much skills and experience, and it's really amazing. And I do get involved with a lot of things outside of work as well, such as being the co-chairman of the BT Muslim Network, and also recently co-founding and being the CEO of ACE Insights. So yeah, that's a bit about me, really.
Yeah, I don't know how you have all the time. It sounds great. You're like covering everything there. Sofia, I wonder if you could introduce who you are and who you're working with in your apprenticeship as well.
Hi, I am Sofia. I am finishing my degree apprenticeship in digital marketing with Home Group, and I've recently secured a permanent role as a digital content executive.
Yeah, cool stuff. John-Joe, I know you've got a bunch of questions for Sofia and me. I'll hand over.
Yeah, no worries. So my first few questions are for Sofia, if that's all right. And the first one is you said previously that you've struggled academically in the past, but now obviously you're in the final year of university because of the degree apprenticeship. So how has the experience been on your degree apprenticeship?
Was that for me? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It's been great. and my degree apprenticeship's really given me like the space and opportunity to grow like my self-confidence and really own the role and like own my abilities and things like that. So it's been really great.
Yeah. Thanks. And why was it important for you to earn while you're learning?
So I think that it's really important for apprentices to like earn while they're learning, because it really like highlights that they're not just an apprentice, and that like apprentices are real assets to organizations, and they're bringing in such value and insight. And I think it gives that apprentice a really good opportunity as well to have like a good work-life balance, so which helps people excel.
Yeah. Brilliant. And finally, what advice would you give to those people who are considering an apprenticeship now?
Yeah, so my advice for those considering an apprenticeship would be like 3 top things, I guess. To have confidence in yourself. You're not like just an apprentice, or it's not just an apprenticeship. You're a huge asset to the organisation, and they're lucky to have you there. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like everyone is nothing's a silly question. Likely someone else in the room is going to have that same question. And lastly is to find an employer that is just as committed to your development and supporting your apprenticeship as you are.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. Thanks very much for your answers. And now I've just got a couple of similar questions for Umayr, if that's okay.
Absolutely, go for it.
Thanks. So, how has your apprenticeship helped to improve your soft skills and map out your career ambitions?
I think that's a really good question, John-Joe. The apprenticeship that I've been on has really contributed to my development in the softer skills space, and has really kind of allowed for me to map out my career ambitions. And I think that's purely down to the nature of an apprenticeship, where you're immediately starting off in a workplace, immediately working on the latest technologies, softwares, and systems within the workplace. In my case, being a software engineer, and that really kind of molds you into interacting with various people, interacting with colleagues, interacting with senior stakeholders on projects that you're working on. And that really develops your networking skills, it develops your communication skills, and it develops so many other softer skills which are really, really relevant and important in developing your career further. And I think I've been very fortunate to have those opportunities both within my day job and also outside of that, and getting involved in various other extracurricular activities through my apprenticeship, such as promoting apprenticeships in the apprenticeship space, and doing various other exciting things, attending schools, colleges, careers fairs, and really doing a lot of public speaking, and also even going to 10 Downing Street at one point. And these kind of moments have really contributed to my development in the softer skills space. And I guess, as a caveat to that, what it's also done for me is kind of allowed for me to understand how the technology industry works, and what's really the aspects of the industry that I enjoy most, and what I really want to go into and further my career at. So the apprenticeship has been a really, really vital piece in allowing for that to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant and insightful answer. And that, I suppose, does bring us on to my next question, is that you were recently presented with the Special Recognition Award at the 2022 National Apprenticeship Awards. So could you please tell a little bit more about the work that you were recognised for in that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had the massive honor and privilege of winning that award during the National Apprenticeship Awards last year in November. And I guess the reason and the kind of recognition was around the work that I've done within the apprenticeship space. And I've been really fortunate to have a very good supporting and supportive group around me, with both within BT and outside of BT, where I've been involved in promoting apprenticeships, particularly to those from disadvantaged backgrounds. And really, when I was applying for apprenticeships, I didn't really resonate with any of the role models there at the time within the space that I could look at and say, hey, that person looks like me. That person is from a similar background to me. I'd like to be like them. So I took it upon myself to ensure that those that are applying for apprenticeships now and in the future have that role model, have that inspiration that they can look at and they can take inspiration from. And so I've been doing a lot of work being featured in our BT apprenticeship promotion campaigns and collateral, visiting 10 Downing Street, like I mentioned earlier, representing apprenticeships and sharing my thoughts with the then Secretary of State for Education around how we can improve apprenticeship uptake for those from disadvantaged backgrounds, and really speaking to people and kind of sending them the message that, hey, you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself and you just have to back yourself. And that's the most important message that I really kind of want to portray across to young people across the country and across the board. And that's kind of the reason why, I've been so successful in promoting that message, and thankfully also been recognized for that work as well through these awards.
Yeah, that's again another brilliant answer, and you can really see how much work's went in that. So a big well done for winning that as well. And finally, what advice would you choose to give to those who are considering an apprenticeship now?
I guess if you're considering an apprenticeship, I'd like to say to you, well done. It's a really fantastic route to go down, and I totally understand it can be a brave decision as well sometimes for many. So absolutely well done for deciding to go down the apprenticeship route. My advice, and I'd keep it very brief, is a few points. The first point is, whenever you're applying for an apprenticeship through a given company, always make the effort to research the company and the activities that they engage in. It's really important you understand the company that you're applying for so that you can assess that you're a good match for that company and that company is good for you. It's really important that you enjoy your job, and it's really important that you work for an employer that is matching towards your values and what means everything that means things that mean a lot to you. So it's really important that you research the company and you also demonstrate your research within your interviews, because it will really show that you're passionate and you've gone above and beyond. I think another thing that is really important is practice. And oftentimes, especially school leavers, if you're leaving from school straight away, interviews can be quite intimidating, and that's totally fine. You may have never done an interview in your life. So it's important that you practice, whether that's with a friend, a family member, or even a teacher at school. Try and get them to conduct a mock interview for you so that you can get a feel of how interviews actually work and how they feel, and build your confidence from there. And I'm sure if you follow that and you practice plenty, you'll be able to ace those interviews whenever you get those as you're applying for apprenticeships.
Yeah. Thanks very much. And I'll hand it back over to Gavin, I think, now, so we can sort of move on.
No, thanks so much for that, guys. I think I think you made a really interesting point of being in, BT, studying software engineering, and talking about, the soft skills, like the business skills around, communications within the communications business, like, software engineering, talking about soft skills. I don't know. I just thought that's really interesting. I wonder if we could bring in David and Sue. David and Sue, thank you so much for being so patient. National Apprenticeship Week, it's such a busy one, and we've kept you waiting there for 23 minutes. I'm so sorry. So I'll introduce David. I've probably known for like 18, 19 years. So David is the CEO of the Association of Colleges, representing the vast majority of colleges in the country, and Sue Pittock, who is the CEO of Remit, also an exclusive feature today on FE News. So Sue, thanks for the double whammy today. First off, I wonder if I could ask everyone. I know we all watched Toby's like pre-record. Is there anything in what Toby sort of covered there? Because he covered a lot, which sort of resonated with anyone at all. Like, I don't know, Sue, David, anything in there which stood out to you?
Yeah, I don't mind going first. I think from a Toby perspective, I think it's amazing that he sees apprenticeships as the gold standard of our education system. I think the part that I worry about is pre the levy being introduced, SMEs was an integral part of the apprenticeship system. So a large proportion of the apprentices that we were servicing were coming from SMEs. And we seem to have lost our way as a country now on how we service SMEs. It's really difficult for an SME to engage with the systems that government want them to operate on. and there's not as much money in the system for an SME once we put the rule in of 20% off the job. So an SME can employ somebody and train them themselves and not have to do the 20% off the job. And if they want to do the gold standard and apply the 20% off the job, I think some SMEs need a little bit more financial support, probably more so than some of the levy clients. And then I think the other part that we need to think about as a country is a lot of business during the pandemic have switched their labour workforce to have a higher concentration of part-time workers. And at the moment, the system means that you have to elongate the length of stay that a learner's on programme, which becomes unpalatable for the learners who just want to be on programme the same time as another colleague that they're working next to. The businesses find it really difficult for that longer length of stay. So if we really want to engage more participation, I think we need a better solution for part-time workers, and we need a different system for SMEs. And then I think you would see a greater increase in participation. And then my other worry, Gavin, is how far the levy will go if we try and use it for multiple things, because there's only so much that employers put in the pot. So unless we go back to the days where DFE and Treasury put the money back in for the SME proportion, it'll only go so far. So yeah, I think we need to be careful what we want to use it for, because the pot will only go so far. And I think the brand and credibility of apprenticeships is growing massively. So we're probably going to need significant more investment to take us through the next 5 years.
Yeah, no, definitely. David, any views?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's just nice to see an opposition skills minister talking with knowledge and insight into these things, and bodes well for the future, because, you know, Labour have got a humongous lead in the opinion polls, and they've got, you know, the best chance of getting in power for, you know, 10, 12 years. So, you know, Toby, I think, seriously understanding the issues and really getting to know what's going on. And it's great that he's here, and that he was happy that John-Joe quizzed him with those really good questions. I mean, a couple of things I picked up from it. I think, Sue, on the levy, I think I completely agree that if Labour give more flexibility on the levy to employers, it would be a disaster, unless they put some caveats on that flexibility and they increase the levy. It's half of 1% at the moment. I think there's a really strong argument to make it 0.75% or even 1%, mainly because if you look at employer investment in skills in this country, it's way lower than any other OECD country. And, you know, and it has been for a long time, and it's gone down in the last 10 years. So employers need to spend more money, and the good ones do, but actually we need all of them too. So I think that levy point, I think, is right, because what we hear from employers is that a lot of them do want to fund kind of sort of fairly informal pre-apprenticeship programs to widen participation, to get into new groups, and they can't do that with the levy. I think it'd be great if there was some facility to do that, for instance. And the other thing I think is really important that Toby said was, we don't want the apprenticeship program to be, you know, kind of polarized, because at the moment there is a risk that it's polarized for really good students who've done well at level 3 at 18 going into degree apprenticeships, and we've got Umayr and Sofia here who kind of fit that, and it's a fantastic program for them, and their experiences I think are really good. But it's kind of, it's then polarized because it's then for the people who haven't done very well at 16, and it's not really a comprehensive program. And I think, like Toby, I'd love to see a world in which, you know, everybody who's, however they've achieved at 16 or 18, think about the apprenticeship as a really realistic, you know, really high quality gold standard program, because we don't have that at the moment. And I think that's what we should be aiming for, that apprenticeships are just part of the offer at 16 and 18 at any age, in a way that they aren't at the moment, because they're just always seen as a slight bolt-on and the gold standard still is GCSE A-level degree, and anything else is slightly inferior. I think we need to change that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's interesting. What do employers want more? Is the gold standard for employers slightly different to what we see in education system being the gold standard? No, really, really good points. Thank you. I wonder if we could pass it over to our apprentices. So I think, should we maybe go with ladies first, with Sofia, Umayr, and then let's bring it back into John-Joe. So I know you've all got questions for Sue and David. So Sofia, I wonder if I could hand it over to you first.
Yeah, fab. Thank you. So I just wanted to ask, so I've done a level 3 apprenticeship before this, and before that finished, I was actually made redundant during lockdown, and that basically led to me finishing my apprenticeship unemployed and unsupported. And I was lucky enough to be in the position that I could finish it. But I wanted to know, in the future, how can we support apprentices better in that situation, and maybe make the process easier to finding or rolling over to a new employer easier?
Okay, I'll take it first then. So for us during the pandemic, as a training provider, all of our apprentices that wanted to stay on programme and the employers wanted to stay on, we were quickly able to flip our solution to an online solution and continue with all of our businesses. And we lobbied really hard with government to say, stop telling any of our clients to hit the breaking learning button. Our apprentices are going to need masses of support during lockdown while they're at home, and we can do that through technology. And then anyone where the businesses, unfortunately, because some businesses couldn't trade their way through that, we got the apprentices to reach out to us, and then we were helping them look for either another placement on the apprenticeship they were on, or if that was a really difficult time with some sectors, we were talking to them about other apprenticeships that they may want to explore that were still able to keep going, because there was winners and losers in the pandemic. Digital seemed to do particularly well. Hospitality and retail were more significantly impacted. And I think from a government point of view, we were really trying to push them to stop and think about the apprentices' mental health, and what is the best solution for apprentices. So hopefully we don't have to go through anything horrendous as COVID and a pandemic again. But I think the learning from that is how the government support businesses to keep people employed, so that people can continue with their programme.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it sounded horrible, Sofia, so well done for kind of getting through it, and congratulations, because I think that shows a lot of resilience, doesn't it? I don't think the government quite understand that in the pandemic it was an obvious big problem, and therefore they kind of wanted to talk about it. But actually, it's a reality for a small number of people every year, and we don't really have a system in place for it. I think good providers like Sue's and others, and colleges will do everything they possibly can, but they're not given any resource to do that. I think there should be a simple payment. It's a fact of life that people get made redundant in business. It's going to happen to apprentices forever. Hopefully a tiny number, but there will always be some. I think there should be a sort of a balloon payment that comes for the provider to be able to help bridge to, as Sue said, either another employer to carry on the apprenticeship, ideally. But if that's not possible, what about other options in colleges and training providers and universities that, to carry on learning at least, because that could be, it might not be ideal, but it could still be a good option to help people not get into that point of feeling hopeless and without any opportunity at all, because I think that's the worst possible place that people can get to.
I think it's a really good point as well. A really
Thank
good
you.
question, Sofia, because are we in a recession? Not in a recession, depends who you're talking to, or how deep is it going to be and how long. And all that would all mean is that people are going to be made redundant more. And I think this then becomes an even more important question to ask. So Sofia, really, really, really good question. I wonder if we could hand over to Umayr, but first off, you got a fan, Umayr. It's very good to see. I wonder if I could hand over to you.
Thank you, Gavin, and thanks, Hassan, for the support and for tuning in. So David and Sue, I'm really passionate about diversity and inclusion and ensuring and helping those from disadvantaged backgrounds, uptake apprenticeships. I guess the theme that I've seen is that a lot of people from these backgrounds feel like they don't belong in these areas, or they don't belong in these roles, and they don't have that belief. So my question to you really is, how can we kind of increase diversity within all levels of the apprenticeship structure, and also kind of open up that conversation within those minority and disadvantaged groups?
Shall I kick off this time, Sue? Just to,
sure.
I think it's a great question. I mean, if you look at the numbers and the different mixtures, there's enormous amount of stereotyping going on as well. So just look at gender stereotyping in construction versus hospitality or care. So there are a number of equality and diversity and inclusion issues across the whole of the apprenticeship program. And in a way, we shouldn't be surprised by that. I mean, we need to do a lot to change it, but it reflects the labour market more generally, doesn't it? So part of the problem is the labour market has all sorts of prejudices and structural problems that disadvantage all sorts of different groups, and the apprenticeship programme reflects that lack of diversity, So there's loads we need to do, and I think we really haven't got to grips with it in the way we should, because we need to work with kind of all three groups, right? So we need to work with the employers, we need to work with the colleges and training providers, and we need to work with the prospective apprentices themselves. So I'm happy to talk to you, Umayr, about this outside, because I could talk about it for the next couple of hours. I'll keep this short. One thing I'd really like to see more of is opportunities for young people at Key Stage 4 to go and do something that mimics an apprenticeship, that gives them the chance to get out and see what it's like, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, there's a lot of ignorance about what does an apprenticeship mean, and school teachers aren't very good at promoting them because they don't know either, so I think the more we can get into schools, particularly in Key Stage 4, maybe even in Key Stage 3, and say to young people, come and do something on this with this employer that kind of mimics what being an apprentice would be like, and get them meeting people like yourself and Sofia and John-Joe as well to inspire them, because I think there's so much pressure on kids to go into that A-level degree route that all of the other options are sort of kind of just downplayed, and they're not deemed to be quite as good, so we need to change that. There's loads of work with employers we need to do, and I think the good news on employers is more want to have a diverse workforce, more understand that diversity for them is good in terms of their effectiveness, it's good in terms of their decision making, it's good in terms of what it looks like to their customers, and they're starting to see apprenticeship as a way of opening up a more diverse set of people to come into the workforce. We need to applaud that, we need to show others, we need to say to everybody, look at these companies that are using the apprenticeship program to diversify, because it's a really, really good thing to do, and there's a big business benefit. And then we need to absolutely get colleges and training providers doing what they do best, because they do try really hard to be equitable at supporting people in the ways they need to help them get on to the thing that will motivate and inspire them. And that needs to be absolutely inclusive and bring diversity to the table.
Yeah, really good point, Dave. Sue, anything you'd want to sort of add to that at all?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can tell from David, this is an area that we're hugely passionate about. So for us as Remit, we do some areas like automotive programs that come with a very stereotypical sort of profile of the usual person that will apply. And we've done some phenomenal work with our clients over the last 12 months to see females coming into automotive, minority groups coming in. I went into our academy 2 weeks ago, and there was a group in there, I couldn't believe it, 50% female in a HGV course. And it's brilliant to see the female apprentices in there engaging with the lads. And then we've got body and paint apprenticeships, where Beth won, I think she won 2 gold awards this year. So we've worked really tactically with our clients to say, how can you promote via our website, your website, and all of the participation to not only get sort of females into automotive, but to really think about those people, because I'd be mortified if somebody didn't feel that they could be good enough to apply for an apprenticeship. Somebody coming out of the school system that's got the right attitude and commitment and really wants to do well can get on in an apprenticeship. So we would encourage anyone to apply. If you take data analyst as an example, females can earn really good salaries. They can do as well as any other group, and typically it's quite a well male dominated area, but females can have a great time doing those programs, and it breaks up the sessions for the apprentices, because they'd prefer to have mixed groups as well. And I think from a government perspective, it'd be great to see more TV advertising that sort of promotes different sectors, with trying to really we all talk about this barrier in the school system of careers advice and getting people into apprenticeships. And I know my niece and nephew, there's no way I'd recommend that they went down a typical route. They've both gone down an apprenticeship route, whether that be a degree or IT type routes, and they're doing phenomenally well in their jobs. And they've been promoted, and one's got shares in a company. I cannot tell you how proud I am of them. And they've gone down an apprenticeship route, which for me, you know, you're always going to do the best by your own family. And the apprenticeship was the gold standard. There was no other choice. You know, the amount of people we see coming out of universities that then don't use that degree, and the apprenticeships is phenomenal. They've been earning while they're learning. They gain all sorts of confidence. But yeah, I wouldn't want anyone in our country to not feel that they could participate in an apprenticeship. So I think it's an amazing question.
I think it's a really good point as well. So around TV advertising and stuff like that. When showing me age now, but WorldSkills Calgary 2009, so a long time ago now. I remember in all of Alberta they had like video, like, you know, proper adverts of like the Canadian Air Force, and it was mainly showing females working on airframes. The cue to do the have a go, which is then covering what Dave is sort of talking about with schools. So at WorldSkills, that was the first time they did the have a go sort of session where you can actually, you know, have learners look at that. It was 50-50, so it's 50% male, 50% female. Affected my eldest son so much that he wanted to then become an aircraft engineer. So that was, you know, like really massively important. I think as well, some really interesting points you both raised, and I think it's how we tackle this all the way through, isn't it? So like, I've worked really extensively with a Black FE leadership group. How can we get more diversity into you know, colleges and training providers? How can then that reflect what, you know, students are seeing? So they want to be able to see a reflection back of like what's normal to them. So Umayr, what you were saying there around where can you see me? I mean, I experienced that when I was went through education. I did so many times. I said, people like you don't do this and stuff. When, you know, it's just really interesting. We've got a question coming which sort of dovetails what everyone's asking actually. So Tom, sorry, it took me a while to be able to bring this up, but what are we seeing in terms of helping people reskill and transition? So I wonder if we could throw it out quick, because we're really running out of time. I might go over if that's right, but I wonder if anyone wants to jump in on Tom's question.
I mean, it's a great question, Tom, and I think not enough, I think, is my answer. And I think at the moment the labour market's so tight, as you know, that we're not even seeing enough opportunities for apprentices, young people coming through, because lots of employers are struggling to provide a proper apprenticeship opportunity, and I think that's really sad. So, but again, I think there's a piece of work to be done, isn't there, about people needing to reskill and move sector, because they don't need to do the whole apprenticeship generally. They will bring all sorts of skills with them, and I think we haven't quite worked out how you do that recognition of the prior learning, recognition of the skills they've already got, in order for them to then not have to do the whole apprenticeship. And there's two or three really good reasons why you'd want to do that. Because for the employer, it means they're getting quickly into being competent and having mastery in that role, rather than having to take the whole program. For the apprentice themselves, it means they can do it more quickly. But the 12-month rule kind of gets in the way a bit of that. And then there's a financial incentive, which for both the employee and the government, it costs less. You know, and I'd really love to see some proper piloting of that kind of opportunity to transfer with recognition of prior learning, systemically done, to be able to take a less of the apprenticeship more quickly, more cheaply, so that the apprentice does achieve their apprenticeship in their new sector and then can start earning a decent wage because they're competent fully in that role.
So anything you want to add really quick with overtime? So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think the other thing we need to be mindful of is how current we keep the apprenticeships. So if you take automotive as an example, there's no green in them, there's no EV in them. So they're not current. So if you look how fast businesses are moving and you want to upskill and reskill, we've got to make sure that the apprenticeship system keeps up to pace with what our education system needs. And at the moment we're lagging a little bit behind. We need to go a bit faster so that we can upskill and reskill. And I couldn't agree with David more. You know, Jeremy Hunt mentioned about looking at solutions for people coming back into apprenticeships that are over 50. I don't think it's really about over 50s per se. I think it's about part-time people and finding that faster solution that somebody doesn't have to do a whole year's program, and you can do a shorter course that still comes with all the credibility, where you can work out the RPL and come up with something that's really meaningful for our country, really.
Yeah, definitely. I've got another question coming in. This sort of really flips back to the to our apprentice presenters now. How can we encourage more school leavers to choose the apprenticeship route? We're over time, so I wonder if you could maybe just give us a one-liner, guys. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think apprenticeships are really effective for some. I think FE is really effective for others. So I wouldn't put it quite as boldly as that. You know, I mean, genuinely, you know, I think some young people are ready to go into work, and we need to do so much more to make it easy for employers to get on to promote what they have to offer. Umayr said it earlier. You know, when you're considering an apprenticeship, actually it's the employer that matters most. You know, and getting employers to promote not just what the experience will be, and I don't think they do that very well generally, but what the progression routes are afterwards, you know, because there's no point doing an apprenticeship for 1, 2, 3 years and then not getting a job at the end of it. It should be the first step to a really good career, and we need to promote it in that way with employers who do that properly. And there are lots that do, and there are some that don't.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We're over time. I'll just John-Joe, Joe, do you want me to ask this final question, or do you want to hand it over to everyone about looking to the future?
It's all right. I can hand it over if that's easier for you.
Yeah.
So if we could all dream and dream big, what do you see sort of for the future of apprenticeships? What would be what you would want to see the most?
Sue.
Yeah, for me, I'd like to see government treating it with an equal parity to other programs like degree programs. There's a lot of money that gets invested in things like degrees. Apprenticeships can offer that alternative solution for those people that don't want to do a degree. A degree is not for everyone. It's great for some, it's not for everyone. And if government can truly get behind financially, so that, you know, some of the questions at the start of this session was, you know, how can we make sure an apprentice is not making a choice on coming off an apprenticeship because of money, as an example. We need to make sure that if we want to upskill not just our young people, but everyone that wants to reskill, retrain, we've got to make sure that we keep this part of our education system with the right investment to it, the right promotion of exactly how powerful these apprenticeships can be, There are some phenomenal apprenticeships out there, and I couldn't agree more with David that choose wisely and do your research on it. But I think from our perspective, we need to make sure that the minimum wage for apprentices is kept at the most appropriate level. Things like investment into certain programs that need to have equipment. We need to make sure that there's the right investment into that equipment so that you can offer the greatest of programs, because apprenticeships can be, certainly my experience, they can be, phenomenal stepping stones for people to have an amazing career. So it's really making sure that everybody in government that has an influence on this really sees this as an equal stepping to an A level or a degree, because they are, and the investment needs to be the same, and we need to keep up pace with making sure that they stay current with everything that's in an apprenticeship, and they don't sort of lag behind.
Yeah, that's cool. Umayr, what would you want to see if you could dream and dream big?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what Sue mentioned. She mentions a few good points there. I think I'd like to see apprenticeships being on the same footing as traditional degree routes. And I think currently, right now, a lot of colleges and schools have a disincentive of promoting apprenticeships and pushing their students into apprenticeships because of the league tables that are not in favor of apprenticeships. As we know synonymously that the more students your school or college sends to university, the better it is for your league table position. And I think it's important that outdated system is replaced with a system that is fair and balanced towards both the degree route, the traditional degree route, and the apprenticeship routes as well.
That's cool. David, if you could dream big.
Yeah, I mean, all of that, I completely agree with Sue and Umayr. I mean, one thing I really would love to see, which is not a really big thing, but wouldn't it be lovely to mimic when you apply to university? Because when you apply to university for a degree, you can see the course, you can see a description, you can get feedback from the people who've done that course, you can see what they've gone on to do in terms of jobs, you can look at the wage outcomes for those jobs. Wouldn't it be lovely if every employer put up the same information? So if BT and Home Group and NCFE said, here are the apprentices we've had in the last 5-10 years. This is where they are now. This is what the outcome for them was. Because it's not just about the experience, although that's critical. It's not just about the transition to get into it and the onboarding. It's also about where it leads to, and I just don't think we do enough about that. And the good employers do a brilliant job at using the apprenticeship program as part of their overall workforce development and recruitment as a system, right? We need to promote that much more. And I'd love to see a system in which particularly the larger employers like BT perhaps said, we're going to start publishing that data. Yeah. And if you don't publish that data as a big employer, maybe you're hiding something. Because I think that would shift perceptions massively.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sofia, what would you want to see?
I would love to see that the perception that apprentices are temporary, cheap labour to be diminished, and I'd love for it to be seen as employers as an investment into a human being who's going to bring huge asset, knowledge, and invaluable perspective to the organisation, rather than a temporary fix.
Yeah,
I 100%
agree.
That was what I'd like to see.
And this live stream is testament, isn't it? It's published, produced, presented by by people that are going through earning and learning. But it's not just a temporary thing. This is a long term. Each one of you are looking to your future, isn't it? It's really cool. John-Joe, what would you want to see?
Yeah, if I could sort of think of any change I'd like to see, I'd really like for there to be more education for sort of school leavers on what apprenticeships are and how to apply for apprenticeships. Because sometimes I feel when you're leaving school, like we've said previously, you don't have a lot of work experience. You often don't have a lot of things to compile into a CV. And that can make it really hard to apply for jobs and apprenticeships as well. So I think I'd like to see sort of more education for young people in schools about how to apply for apprenticeships once they've left, or or what would be best to put into a CV, or how best to actually go about looking into these apprenticeships to find out what best suits you, and then how to go about making those things happen.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, and thank you, everyone. So we've totally gone over, but I think the questions are really good, and I think that it was, it's well worth it for this week of any. Tom as well has said thank you for the answers, and he's saying that automotive is definitely one sector that's changing at a huge velocity. With hybrids, to EVs, to could your car be a battery for your house in the future? It's all very, very interesting stuff. We're in a fast changing world of work. Happy National Apprenticeship Week, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to say thank you to all of our visitors that are live. You can catch this on Catch Up. There'll be some bonus material from Toby in Catch Up as well. And I just want to say thank you to John-Joe. You managed that beautifully. Thank you, John-Joe. It was brilliant to see that. Sofia and Umayr, thank you for joining us as guests and presenters. David and Sue, thank you so much as well. This is totally co-produced, so I want to say thank you to the team at NCFE, and also I want to say thank you to the team at FE News. 3 apprentices put this all together in the background, and it worked beautifully, and it was all a real testament to the team. So Finley, thank you for leading the project on this. Thank you to Holly and Danielle for cutting all videos and for making all the socials all work beautifully. And I just want to say, everyone, have a really fantastic celebration this week of National Apprenticeship Week. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you really soon. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.